Hey guys, welcome back to the studio. Hope you enjoyed that first session. I'm really excited to introduce our next guest. She's a author and an instructor at Syracuse University, a professor at Syracuse University. I won't take too much of her thunder. I'll let her introduce herself. But ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Regina Luttrell.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. You guys get 2 hours of me, so I get to be up on the stage for social media strategies, and then we're going to talk a little bit about mis and disinformation. Sergeant Riddle is going to help with my slides, so thank you very much as we progress through the day. Yes, as Kwande said, I am Dr. Regina Luttrell. We can advance, I think, to the next. Yes, there we go. A little bit about me. Dr. Regina Luttrell, I am the Associate Dean for Research and Creative Activity at Syracuse University within Newhouse. My areas of expertise are public relations, social media, AI, mis and disinformation, and I also research generations. So when someone talked about Gen Z and how do we reach them, that's part of some of my research efforts. I've written a couple of books, probably I think 15 in total, but these most would directly connect back to I think what all of you are doing. So I made this slide deck very interactive, and I'm told that it can be shared with all of you. So throughout the deck, we are going to look at some of the links, but I know from the students that I teach, military students that I teach in the classroom, and anytime I am lecturing to DINFOS or in some other capacity, links are always very helpful when you get back to the field. So if we can advance to the next slide, please. All right, today this is what's on deck. We're going to talk about the conversation prism. We're going to talk about social media strategy, how to get started, how PESO plays a key role into that, contagious campaigns, and that's really the crux of what we're going to talk about today, because that idea of creating something that is contagious, something that is sticky, something that resonates with your audience is going to be central to developing a social media strategy. We'll talk a little bit about best practices and how to engage, and then, of course, my favorite, always, free resources. So, as Kwande said earlier, if you do have a question, please come up to the mic and ask. I really do like my sessions to be interactive, and I can only do that if you are raising your hand and asking me questions. So, next slide, please. So, to me, social media is art. It's art because everything that you do to capture that moment is vital and it's important. From the pictures that you take, from the content that you write, there is an art to it. You have to be able to capture your audience. You have to be able to tell that story in just one picture, in just 280 characters. That's what's compelling about social media. Some of my favorite social media platforms, or not platforms necessarily, but social media accounts, GE. I have never seen a wind turbine look so beautiful because they're able to capture that and they're able to tell that story in just one snap. California Highway Patrol, again, fascinating. If you've never looked at some of these accounts, you should look at them. There was a high-speed chase. I mean, there was a picture that was captured with wind and dust, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely amazing. That's what their target audience is looking for. We have to figure out what your target audience is looking for. And your commandant this morning talked a little bit about that. I think some of you are recruiting. Others may be at a base or somewhere that is connecting with military families. I've done a little bit of research. I went on your websites, on your social channels. So yes, so it's definitely art, but it's also science, because you can't have that beautiful imagery, because at the end of the day, so what? Who cares? You can post as much as you want, but if you don't have content that is engaging and that your audience is not responding to, then it really doesn't matter what you are putting out there. It doesn't matter which channels you're on. It doesn't matter at all. You're just putting information out onto the social sphere. What tells you that something is good is the data, though, the measurement piece of it. And you have so much data at your fingertips. Yes, I do think it's really important if you have a social listening tool that you are able to bring into your strategy, because not only can you look at that on a monthly basis, but you can look at it on a daily basis. And so while we're not going to really talk about predictive analytics here today, that's what helps you understand when a crisis is coming your way, or something as simple as a post that really resonates. So the science behind it, the data-driven decisions, everything that you are creating should be powered by data. You shouldn't go into a campaign questioning or wondering, is this going to work? You should already know. Like, okay, I know that our audience checks at 2 in the morning, or our audience is up at 6 a.m. in the morning. I know that when we did this campaign or a similar campaign last year, these were our results, and I can build upon those. So the data is the science piece of it. You cannot have a social strategy without both. Next slide, please. But this is what you are competing with. This is called the conversation prism. I have been following, so Brian Solis, who is one of my favorite, he calls himself an evangelist now. I'd like the title of evangelist someday. This is his, and the Just 3 is the creative designer here. So this is what the social sphere looks like in terms of the number of platforms. When I first started using this, so 2011 was the first time he ever created the conversation prism. When I first started to use this, I could actually read what was on the outside. I can no longer do that, and I don't know if it's because I'm older, or the social sphere has gotten larger, but I can't anymore, which means this is what you are competing with. When social first started in 2010 and we were monopolized by Facebook, that was it. But now, these are all the channels. Next slide, please. So within this social prism, this is really important. At the center, there's 28 categories here, right? But at the center is you, and it's not you. It's your target audience. It's them. It's the consumer of one. I can guarantee you that my social feed looks vastly different than yours. But if you're vying for my attention, you need to understand how to get in touch with me. So when you are, this is just one, I think, tool that you can use to try to understand who it is. So you need to understand what the experiences are of your target audience. What is flowing through? And yes, we talked a little bit about algorithms and how that can change, of course. And social platforms typically will change their algorithms at any given time. So you could be going along really, really good and something's exciting and it's working, and then all of a sudden it doesn't anymore. And that's because they changed an algorithm. So you need to understand who this is. Who is that target audience? What do they think? How do they act? How do they behave? What media are they consuming? Which platforms are they on? Because that's where you want to be. And so as you look at this and you go from the center and you look out, Halo 2, you have to focus on listening, learning, engaging, and co-creating. So Kwande talked a lot about that this morning. That listening is the very first piece. You need to listen to what your audience is saying through their comments, through their shares, how they're interacting with you, how they're interacting with your channels, how they're interacting across all platforms, which can be hard, which is why social listening platforms are really a good metric, or a really good way to do that and find the metrics. Once you learn their behaviors and you see when they're on, what they're posting, where they're going, then you can start to engage. And that's responding. The final step is that co-creating piece, which is really where you want to be. You want to not only be able to create information, but there's user-generated information, right? So you give the power to your audience to create content for you, with you. That's the epitome of where you want to go. Then you know, I can comment on anything, but that does not mean that I am fully engaged with you. It may mean I'm engaged in that post in that moment, But when you give me the power to co-create along with you, I'm able to make more of an impact, and so are you. And I feel super special because, oh my gosh, I'm on your Facebook page. I'm on your Instagram page. The third part of the social sphere here, the conversation prism, is helping you understand the impact. So this is the measurement piece that we talked about. And we're going to talk a little bit more about measurement, and I'll give you another tool that's that's relatively easy to look at and count those metrics. But it's your reach, it's your relevance, it's your social capital, it's your popularity, it's your influence. Because again, you're vying for attention. And there isn't a lot of attention that you can grab. I mean, think about your own social channels. How much do you really pay attention to? How much do you just scroll past? When do you click through? You click through when it matters to you. When you want to get to the next piece of this, piece of the puzzle, piece of the content. And then Halo 4 is the manifestation, right? So then it's everything coming together. It's when your campaign works really well. Next slide, please. I threw this in here because I wanted you to see some of the overview. So this is social media usage, which I think is really important. The number of social media users, 4.7 billion. Okay, and then you go back to that the conversation prism, and you can see where they are. That's crazy, 4.7 billion. Number of hours people spend on social media per day. And then there's a good breakdown between gender you have going on here. But Hootsuite has some really good, Hootsuite, Sprout Social, those are two of my very favorite platforms to go to look for some data and information to help understand where people are, how long they're spending on a platform, what they're doing, their behaviors, right? Because when you are pulling together your social strategy, you have to understand your audience and their behaviors. And sometimes this is a good place to see where some data that they have pulled. So that's there for you. This will link out to a report when you get the slide deck. All right. This is the roster model, and this is part of a larger strategic planning initiative. We are only going to focus on two areas of the roster model today, which is strategies and tactics. But you cannot jump to just strategies and tactics. You have to start with research, right? So that's understanding. So this model is research, objectives, strategies, tactics, and then a piece of tactics is peso. So having an integrated campaign, you need to have paid, earned, shared, and owned. Implementation, and then reporting and evaluation. This model is a little bit different than some of the other models that you may have seen because there is research throughout the entire process. So most models that you probably have heard of or learned about previously, ROPE, ROSI, RACE, they are very linear. They start with reporting or research and they end with evaluation. Here, this whole idea of research is woven throughout the entire process. So you have developmental research. When you're first kicking off your campaign, when you have like, oh, I have an idea. Or there might be certain times of the year where you're going to develop a campaign. We are long past a communications director starting in January saying, okay, here's the plan for the year. As communications professionals, you're starting plans probably every month, right? They are smaller. Sometimes you have more strategic long-term campaigns, but in general, they're a little bit smaller, especially if you are on social media. So that's your developmental research piece of this. And then as you move through your campaign, because of the data that you are receiving in real time, you can understand behaviors. That's part of your research, and you can change your campaign if it isn't working. Or if it is, maybe you want to boost a little bit more of something that's coming through. And then in the end, you have this evaluative research, right? So you can go back to see what has worked, what didn't work. But for our purposes today, we're going to look at strategies and tactics. Next slide, please. Okay. To create a good social media strategy, this is what you need. So tell me, how many people are on your team? Are you like one-person band? Okay. Most of the audience has a one-person band. 4 people? That's pretty. Comstrat. Okay, so you have quite a few people. All right, good. So 4 people. 3. All right, so relatively pretty decent size, but relatively small, right? So you have to make sure that everybody in this, so whoever your team is, that's really important, that you are all aligned, that you understand the strategy behind what you are doing. What is the purpose? So this is something every time I have military students in my class, I always say to them, like, who's your target audience? Because that helps you define what the, did you just say you didn't know?
So at Marcent, we have our, domestic audience within the continental United States, but also we're trying to influence over in, the Arabian Peninsula, Arabian Gulf. So who essentially is our audience? It depends on the time of day.
Yes.
We actually post our products.
Right. That's important. So when your commandant was standing up here and he was talking about recruiting, I was like, that's the first audience that I always go to, right? Because these are external channels. Social media is an external channel. But when I have students in my classroom, that is often what I hear. Or I'm on a boat and this is who I'm trying to reach. That's really, it's hard. But this is probably the most important step here, is the team itself and understanding what that purpose is. Because if you don't know what your purpose is, then you cannot effectively work across the different channels. You shouldn't be on every channel. You should be on the channels that matter most to your target audience. But then that also, right, there's a rippling effect here, that also matters on who are you trying to reach. So if you have an Instagram strategy for people in the military already, great. But if you're trying to reach another audience and you want to use short form video, then that's a different strategy and that's a different campaign. So sometimes you have to have very targeted, smaller campaigns within your larger structure. Because what you don't want to do is create the same content to be shared across every channel. Because the target audience for each of these platforms is different. And your voice. So what does that voice look like? Is it funny? Is it serious? Is it snarky? Right? Like Wendy's and McDonald's will often snark back and forth at each other on Twitter, which is really funny. You have some social identities that will, interact with their audience and pick on them and tease them. So what does that look like for you? That voice has to be consistent. So if you are a team of 1, that's going to be pretty easy because you're the only person that is controlling that narrative. But if you have a team of 4, then you all have to understand what that looks like. What does that sound like? What are the types of images that we want to use? What are the types of videos that we want to capture? And you have to be aligned in all of that. And that's part of that social strategy that you're pulling together. So this is, when we talk about social strategy, you are always working in paid, earned, shared, and owned. We call this the peso model. But Ginny Dietrich, who developed this in 2013, said that if she had her druthers, she would have named it OSEP, owned, shared, earned, and paid. Because everything starts with your owned channels. You own nothing except your website. And if you host your blog there, you own that. But you don't own Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Pinterest. You don't own any of that. And once you post content there, you don't own it anymore either, because your audience does. And what they say and how they interact is what matters most. They take control of that narrative. You can step in and be part of the conversation. It's like working with the media. Once you send that press release out, you lose control, right? Because it's how they are going to take that information and write up their story. A comprehensive social strategy should have a mixture of each of these areas, but always driving back to owned channels. Gary Vaynerchuk, who's an author, he has this really great book. It's old, but it is still tried and true. It's called Jab, 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 Right Hook. So the metaphor is boxing. So who knows something about boxing in here? Anyone? Kind of. All right, you have your hand the most up. Tell me about boxing. What does that mean? If I say jab, 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 right hook, what does that mean?
It's a form. You're taking one, you're evaluating your...
I think he has a mic for you. I'm sorry, because there's online people. Thank you.
It's a strategy and form. You're evaluating your opponent and you're using your hits appropriately to hit their weak spots.
And then what happens in the end?
They either hit you back or they go down.
Well, your right hook, right?
Yes.
So your little jabs, and then you have your big right hook. So the idea behind social media and the idea behind this strategy of jab, 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 right hook is that you have lots of little pieces of content, and then in the end you hit them with something really big and impactful. So you were talking about your grants, right? How do I get people to apply for these grants? So this is one way, right? I was sitting in the audience and I almost wanted to raise my hand and jump in. But this is one thing that you can do. So you have whatever your call is, and it's probably, you put it out on your website? Typically, yes. Okay. So you have that information, and I can go there and I can try to find it. And listen, I work with my faculty every day. We are constantly looking for grants to apply for. But what I want more is I want to know what worked before. So tell me that story. Show me images of what's happening from these. I mean, you have people that that have earned the grant awards previously, right? So who are they? What did they do? How was it successful? Tell me, show me. So maybe that's reports that you can link to. Maybe that's images that come from. You're going to see some of our data from a DARPA grant that I'm working on. Show me what that looks like. And have the call to action so that then I can go to your website. So wherever you are. So what channels are you on? Just
So LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
so LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. That's a lot, right? Are you a party of one?
I'm not the party, but it's a party of three.
Okay.
I just help that party.
So 3 people, and you
sorry.
assist them. So 4 channels. How do you create content that is different for each of these channels? So Twitter, right? Twitter, I'm going to say, here's my call, and I'm going to put a bit.ly. Why am I going to put a bit.ly? Does anybody know? Yeah, tracking. I want to see how many people are clicking on the link, and then once they get to my website, then I can follow that traffic. Those are my metrics. That's the science behind this. So bit.ly, I'm going to have Twitter, I'm going to have a 280-character tweet. I'm going to include my bit.ly, and then I'm going to have an image. And I don't want your logo as my image. That is not engaging to me, right? I want something that's going to pull me in. So figure out what that image is, right? So that it tells the story. LinkedIn, very, very different, right? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Let me go back to Twitter real quick here. Also a hashtag. So create your own hashtags, but be consistent and use them across time. Because the idea behind a hashtag is that you can follow the conversation. It collectively brings people together. So a hashtag that we often use at Newhouse is called Newhouse Impact, and it has to do with our research and creative activities. So when our faculty are at conferences and presenting, we will use that hashtag. Anytime we make an announcement, we use that hashtag. So we have an actual hashtag strategy. That's only one of a few that we use. Don't go overboard. Choose the ones that are, choose a hashtag that is most relevant and most important to your overarching strategy, what you are trying to do. So we have like 2 or 3 that we use on a consistent basis. So find what those are for you. And there are tools. There's a tool called hashtagify.me. That's a website, and you can put in a hashtag and you can see how it might, it's not what's already out there, but if you're developing a hashtag and you have that strategy, you can put in what you want your hashtag to be, and then you can see how it might resonate on the social sphere, okay? So that's a really easy way to gauge possible engagement. And if it looks like it's good, perfect, then start using it. But use it over a long period of time. So there you have Twitter. All right, LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I can give a little bit more information. I now have like a couple of paragraphs. I'm going to use a hashtag strategy there too. I'm going to link back to my owned channels. And I may or may not need a picture there. LinkedIn's very text-based heavy. In some instances, it's sort of turning into a little bit of Facebook. For the most part, though, it's still very business-centric. Instagram, you said, was another? Yes. Okay, so Instagram, I want to see pictures. Show me what's happening in a lab, right? You're funding these individuals. They have to be doing something that's exciting. So 2 of my colleagues are going to present later today or tomorrow on AI. Dr. Chalk has an outstanding AR/VR studio. Her students are doing things that just blow my mind, which you'll all learn about. But they're great pictures. I can go into that lab, I can take pictures, I can tell that story. Now I want to apply for a grant that motivates me to do that same kind of a thing, right? You're granting. As part of your grant, maybe that's a piece of what you do, a piece of your requirements, right, that you share. They're going to share their data, right? But also show us, show me, tell me, engage me, make me excited. Did I hit all your social platforms? What did I miss? Yeah, okay, good deal. Right? Makes sense. So tiny little jabs and then your big right hook. And the idea also, again, is that if you are going back to your owned channels, the ones that you control, and you create content that what we like to call is sort of evergreen, then you can pull from that large body to continue to promote over. So also, that strategy works when you're teasing something out. We're launching a podcast in a couple of weeks. So I already have a social strategy for it. I have social posts that are ready to go on Instagram and on our Twitter. Those are our 2 largest platforms that we use. So again, even though there's all these other platforms, we're very targeted in where we're putting our time and energy. I have social posts that are ready to go, appropriate for each of these channels for the weeks leading up. The week of, I'm going to promo it. The week after, I'm going to remind you. And then as I continue to roll out other podcasts with other researchers, I will link back to those. I will in some way, make sure that, hey, if you didn't hear Nasheen a couple of weeks ago, here's a little bit, here's a teaser from the podcast episode. So give me a little bit of that information. Anytime you have audio or video, that also helps a lot because then you're able to tease some of the information to your target audience. Questions? Thoughts? Okay. Next slide, please. These are just some examples of paid, earned, shared, and owned, and the types of media. So for paid media, you have online social ads, you have some traditional ads, sponsored content. Earned, we always jump to media relations and also blogger relations, but also earned media is SEO, right? Having an SEO strategy, it's great. There's a lot of things that you can stack on here. Shared media. So we've been talking readily about social media content, or networks rather, but user-generated content is also another area of shared, right? Because somebody else is taking that content and either sharing it themselves or they're creating content about you. But give them permission to do that. You have some people that are going to create content about you whether you want to or not, right? That's not user-generated content. In a way it is, but this is like partnering up. So it's somebody that understands your brand, understands your voice, and can connect. And then owned media. So your websites, your apps, your collateral materials, multimedia content, that's all yours. And again, make sure you're always driving back to owned media. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so we're going to watch a really quick video. If you click on her picture. I will say this. So this is Daniela. She is from TEL Public Relations. And so she summarizes, I'm sorry. So she summarizes, she says that this is a public relations strategy. But really what she's talking about is a social strategy. And so we are going to look at a quick video, and then we'll do some analysis with some examples that I have. Okay, so sorry, there you go.
So you want to build a campaign that is
Wait,
fire. But
can we just stop that real quick? It won't play on the screen? Okay. Yes, it will, she said.
I don't really know how to go about that. I got you. I'm going to walk you through the 5 components of any successful campaign. And while we could do a whole comprehensive...
Sorry about that. Okay. While they work that out, does anybody have questions about things that we've covered? Yes, you do. Okay, I think you need to come to a mic, though, because we keep running around with handhelds, so it's helpful.
Hi, I'm Bethany Crouch. I'm with DISA Digital Communication, and I just wanted you to maybe talk about or share some tips for developing an SEO strategy. And also, you're mentioning paid, but what about if you're with an organization that doesn't have the opportunity to utilize a paid approach to social media?
Yeah, that's really tough. And I would make a really, okay, so can I ask you why, I'm sorry, I should have kept you at the mic. Why can you not, no, she's like, I don't want to be at the mic. There's no budget whatsoever for paid. Oh, federal law, okay, all right, so I understand that. All right, so you are right, you are going to have to use an SEO strategy to be able to get, so we talk about organic content, like what rises to the top at Google? Yeah, well, you know what rises to the top at Google? Paid rises to the top at Google. So it's really hard. This session doesn't focus on SEO, but I will come up to you after and we can have a good conversation. I'll give you some really good tools for it, okay? All right, I think we have our video ready.
So you want to build a campaign that is fire, but you don't really know how to go about that. I got you. I'm going to walk you through the 5 components of any successful campaign. And while we could do a whole comprehensive video on the before, during, and after of launching and growing your campaign, I'm going to focus primarily on 5 elements that you should consider to make the campaign super contagious and to make it very shareable. Let's get into it. The first component of any successful campaign is making something that's highly showable. That means it lends itself to being photographed and to being captured by users. So here's what I mean. You have seen those organizations where they have some kind of campaign and they send people out in the middle of a town square to give hugs to people, and they'll have signs that are like, oh, free hugs. Now essentially it's leading to something where the t-shirt pushes people to the organization's name or something like that, but it lends itself to be shown, captured visually. So even if a person doesn't participate in the campaign, they can't help but to take a picture or to go and tell a friend about it or to capture it on video or to post about it on Instagram because it's highly showable. So if you're creating any kind of campaign that doesn't rely on a visual in order to be shared, you're already setting yourself up at a disadvantage. So recently we had a client who said they wanted to do something where they were giving away free mentorship programs. That's well and good, and trust me, we think it's important to be mission-based whenever you're doing anything in your business, but that could be an entire campaign that doesn't have to be advertised at all. The entire cycle of that campaign could live in the background, and that's not what we want. So let's say that we're going with the idea of like, oh, we want to mentor young people for free. Okay, that's really great, but you could recruit, train, mentor, all of that without anybody knowing. And all of that can happen and not be shown. It's not necessarily something that's exciting to capture if it was shown. So you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're putting together for this campaign is highly showable. It lends itself to being seen. And even if a person didn't want to participate, they can't help but to snap it, to record it, and share it with their friends because it's so enticing or so unique visually. The second component of any successful campaign is its
All right, so that idea of showability, we talked about that. That's the art behind it. Those are the pictures, those are the images, those are the videos. what she's talking about at the end is that user-generated content. It's that shared media. It's that person taking the ownership or taking the onus or the privilege or the honor of saying, I really love this brand and I want to share with other people. I'm excited about my experience being in the Marines, about my experience as an FBI agent, right? Or being part of that family. So like I said, we're going to look at some military social platforms in just a minute. There was an entire post all of military parents hugging their babies and their kids. And like, I don't know, maybe it was me as a mother, but I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. That's beautiful. And that story resonated with me. There's others that I see that are about combat, not so much resonating with me, but it might with somebody else in your audience. So that piece of that showable content, that is really important. Every one of these platforms has moved away from heavy text. Even Facebook. Facebook started off as just, a post. Kwande talked about 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And that was easy and that was enough. That's not enough anymore. There has to be more to it. There has to be something that makes me get excited because you are trying to break through my social sphere. And my social sphere is very different. And I'm just going to scroll past you. So you have to have that engagement. You have to have that image that just resonates and tells your story, whatever that story happens to be, wherever you are. Okay, thank you.
It's degree of invitation. So what I mean is if you're promoting anything, you're doing any kind of campaign, and it rests on you shouting at other people and telling them what you're about, and they have to just listen, you're doing it wrong. A truly successful campaign hinges on people talking back to you. It is dependent on people's participation and it invites their voice to the table. So whether it's something where you're calling for submissions or you're asking people to share their story, people tend to participate when they're allowed to talk about themselves, when they can participate, when they can share about their background, when they can showcase their experiences. Because honestly, basic psychology says that people like to talk about themselves. This has been proven time and time again. Research has shown the brain activity that goes off whenever we talk about ourselves. So if that is people's natural tendency, why not design a campaign that caters to that, as opposed to trying to climb an uphill battle of making them do what you want them to do? Do something that lends itself to what they already do, which is talk about themselves. So can your campaign invite them to show off what they've got going on or to submit their story and talk about themselves? So for example, you see some of these brands on TikTok that have partnered with different TikTokers and created challenges, and you have to either dance or show off your shoes. And let's be honest, a lot of the sponsored campaigns on TikTok are corny. I'm just gonna say it, they're cheesy. But the reason they're so contagious is because they let people put their own spin on it. They encourage you to put your own style on the campaign. So let's say, for example, DSW, the shoe company, did a campaign a couple months ago on TikTok. It was cheesy, I'm gonna say it. But the reason it was so successful and had so much participation is because it encouraged people to show off their personal shoe collection. So there was a certain song and a certain dance you had to do, but it allowed you to show your shoe collection. So even if you had no interest in DSW or no interest in buying new shoes, you're gonna participate because you wanna show off your shoe collection too. So that's a perfect example of having a campaign that invites people to show off some aspect of themselves or to tell some part of their story. If you can create some kind of component in your campaign that invites people to do that, you're on your way towards success. The next component of any successful campaign.
So that's the engagement piece again, right? It's how do I become part of that story? How do I step into the role of being a co-content creator? If we go back to the conversation prism, where did it start? What was at the center? Your audience, right? And that's exactly what this is talking about. It's that audience member. Everything drives down to that person, whoever that is, and the interactions that they have. Being part of that bigger conversation, it makes us feel special. I mean, think about if it's not you, maybe it's your kids, maybe it's somebody else. If a brand calls you out, That's kind of exciting, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think there was a person behind that. Yeah, of course there's a person, there's you. And so think about the people that are responding to your comments, to your stories, and when you write them back. When we talked about the team, understanding that purpose, sometimes part of that team is identifying those within your, I don't know if it's necessarily your office, but your military base, wherever that happens to be. Do you have people that just naturally generate good content on their own personal social channels? And if you do, can you recruit them to be part of your social strategy? Because if they already have a large following, that's half the battle. So the social sphere works in this way, right? Here's you at the middle of it. And say I have 5 friends, right? My 5 friends, each of them have 5 friends. Each of them have 5 friends. You get this networked image here going? That's called an audience of audiences of audiences. So I have 3,000 followers. How many do each of you have? How many do people online have? Because that's who we're reaching right now. I may say something and somebody online might tweet it out that will get to other people. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you already have people either on your team, on your base, somebody, a resource that is resonating with your target audience, find a way to work with them. That's the whole idea behind influencers, right? But you have influencers within your ranks that can be part of that voice. You probably do, right? Figure out who those people are. When blogging first hit, this was always like, well, find somebody who likes to blog. Find somebody who, yeah, of course, you're going to use that person to help create that content. Because social media, I joke about this all the time, but I call it the content monster, right? You have to feed the content monster. And some of these channels are hungry a lot, right? So LinkedIn, it's only hungry once a week. Instagram, 3-4 times a day. Twitter, you can tweet up to 30 times a day. That's a lot of content. What are you going to say? Find other people to help tell that story with you. We can start again?
Is simplicity. Now, I know this doesn't sound very fun or exciting, but here's the key about this particular component. If it's really complicated for someone to explain to somebody else, then they're not going to explain it to somebody else. They're not going to share it at all, either because they're confused or it takes too much effort to repeat to another person. And a lot of popular campaigns, a lot of successful campaigns have hinged on their shareability, but people can't share it with their friends, nor do they want to if it's a complicated idea. Sometimes when I'm watching Shark Tank, which is one of my favorite shows, and you see people getting up there to pitch their idea, you'll see a lot of the sharks shut down immediately when they can't explain it or when they have to ask multiple follow-up questions to make sure they understand the concept. As soon as you have people struggling to understand what it is or struggling to explain it to somebody else, you've lost them, because the most contagious factor of a campaign is that people can rapid fire and excitedly and willingly talk about it to their friends. They want to go and tell their friend about this crazy cool thing they saw, or this really unique and exciting thing that they saw when they were at the mall or when they were browsing online. You can't wait to tell a friend, but you're not going to do that if it was too hard to understand, or if there were too many obstacles or barriers to entry in order to participate. So earlier we talked about the importance of having some kind of component that invites people and allows them to participate. But if you make it too difficult to access, then you just kind of made it really counterproductive. So the key here is to make sure that it's simple, meaning it's easy to share with others and articulate, and it's also easy for people to participate. As soon as you've made it difficult to access or to talk about, you just blew your chance.
Pause, please.
And the final component of any successful...
So this is pretty simple, right? Think about your elevator pitch. If you had to go to your commander, you had to go to somebody to say, okay, this is the campaign we want to do, and you had 5 minutes with that person, that's what you want. Because again, you're capturing the attention of your target audience in a very short period of time. And if it's something they like, then they're going to create that content, they're going to share, and it's going to spread across the social sphere. So somebody had asked about how do I grow my audience. Was that you, ma'am? No, who? Somebody did. Oh, yeah. Yes, okay, right? So you're stuck at a certain level. Well, these are some of the ways in which you can get beyond that level. Because if you can tap into their audience, into who's following them, then you can increase. Your likelihood of increasing your followers will increase too. Because remember, social media, we are following people that are similar to us or that have similar likes. We follow brands that in common with other people. And there's that hashtag strategy too. You can bring that in, right? So if we have our own personal social channels that have our friends and family and colleagues, et cetera, then of course, that information that I like, I'm going to share. And it makes it really easy too, right? So on Instagram, I have a list of my friends, and anytime I see something that's like a cute pair of shoes or something that interests me, I will send it to them, right? And there's a coupon for it, and then we can go to the website. So it's this whole cyclical thing. But I've already shared it with another group of people, and that's essentially what you want. We can start again.
The final component of any successful campaign is not necessarily a sexy or exciting one, but it might be the most important, and that is determining your success metrics. So how will you know that the campaign did well? Hopefully it's not something silly like likes, which we can't really translate into anything tangible or meaningful. But how will you know that you did a good job or that it worked? For many people, that could be something like website traffic. So you design the campaign and house a big part of it on the website. So for people to access, they have to come through the website and take a look, and they have to vote or whatever it is. But you use web traffic as a way to determine whether or not the campaign was successful. Another could be shares on social media, right? Which we know to be more valuable than something as simple as likes, because people engage more, and also the multiplication that takes place. The way that it grows is really expansive and important. It could be a number of registrations if people have to register for something. It could be product sales. But how will you know that you did a good job and that you're reaching your goals? It's really important that you home in on that before anything else. The next component of a successful campaign, this one's kind of optional, but it works well if you integrate it, and that is some kind of layer of exclusivity. So if you can in some way make people feel like they're the only ones and cater to our basic need to feel special and unique, that's a win. We once had a client who was hosting a Valentine's event, and instead of blasting out the news that she was having this event and coming from an angle of, oh, I want you to come, please buy tickets, everyone's welcome. Well, that doesn't compel you as much, even if she's showcasing the details of the event and enticing you by telling you what the program's gonna be and the food and all of the features, because it's like it's putting you in a position of, please, everybody come, I need sales. And that doesn't really prompt us to feel special. But if you do something where you hand select a certain group of people to get invitations and you send them out, which she did, she sent out these very intricate, almost ridiculously intricate invitations to a select group of people. She didn't even have to tell them to share on social, because it catered to that very first component we talked about, which is making something that's highly showable. So it was so intricate, you can't help but to share with your friends the unboxing. And so she sent these invitations out to pre-selected people to invite them, and them only, to this event. Well, of course, when they've got their phones out and they are, recording, like, oh my gosh, look at this invitation. Oh, and they're like recording and zooming in on that fancy invitation they're getting. Naturally, the first inclination of their followers and people viewing that video is, what's this event? What is it for? Why didn't I get one? How do I get involved? How did you get selected? How can I be selected? And so it plays on our need to be invited, to be included, and it plays on our joy, we won't admit it, in feeling special and top tier. That's why you have general admission and then you have VIP, and people selecting VIP because they want to feel like there's some kind of imaginative hierarchy. Okay, all of that. Again, your best bet is to play toward people's basic human behavior, our psychology, and our egos in order to have a campaign that's highly shareable, attractive, and overall successful. So even though there are tons of different creative things that you can do to make sure your campaign is successful, in my opinion, these are the top 5 to make sure that you have a campaign that brings you a new audience, that enhances your reputation, and does a great job of increasing brand awareness about your overall brand, or gives you success with some kind of new product launch or campaign. So I hope that you're successful in this. If you have any questions.
So this last piece that she is, we can go back to the slide deck too when you are able. This last piece that she's talking about, we call that social currency, right? There's a lot of examples of social currency out there. Anytime Google betas something, they only give it to a select few people, and then they go, here, you can have 10 email addresses to send this to. Invite your closest friends. That's social currency. Hey, did you try out this new feature? Did you? There's a restaurant in Philadelphia that makes $100 Philly cheesesteak. I don't think I've ever paid $100 for a Philly cheesesteak in my life. But if I tried it, I would tell someone else because that's kind of cool. Like, what's in it? It tastes good, right? And then I have social currency, and I'm like, oh my gosh, last time I was in Philly, I had this cheesesteak. It was $100. They're like, what? Right? So that piece of making me feel special. Can we go back to her last slide before we jumped in? So I'm going to jump a couple of paces ahead because we only have 10 minutes here. But these are contagious campaigns. This is the foundation for creating a strategy that works. And we've talked about these in many different ways. Showable, degree of invitation, that two-way communication, making sure that I am not only pushing out information, but I'm receiving information, I'm hearing it, and I am interacting. Simplicity, easy to understand, easy to share, easy to articulate, easy to participate. Measurement, and then we just talked about social currency. Next slide, please. So this summarizes social currency for you, and I have quite a few resources on my website if you wanted to learn more about it, but that's a central component of a social strategy, is making something that is that other people want to take part in, making your target audience feel really special. I'm going to skip through the next video, and I just wanted to go to some of the next one. Okay, so this is also a video. Do we have time to show just a small portion of it? So I wanted you to use those 5 metrics that we talked about, the showability all the way through the contagious, just to see this is content coming from the Navy Times, Military and Navy Times. I don't know if we have time to do it. If we don't, that's okay. You guys can look at it at another time. Oh, I think we need to. Here's a hint. It does. So this video is really good. I will. How about we do this? It's just too complicated, and that's okay. You can look at it another time. But the videos that I put in here, all of them have those 5 characteristics. So if you're looking for that, the one thing that I would argue is sometimes they're a little long. It depends on which audience you are trying to reach. So if there's an older demographic, they might sit through a video that is 8, 10, 12, 15 minutes long. If you're trying to reach your Gen Z or Alpha, which is the next generation coming up, you want that to be really short and tight. You might even want 30 seconds. Okay? Can we go to the next slide? I think we're stuck here. It's all good. Questions while we figure this out? Someone's got to have a question. Excellent. We have somebody coming up to the mic right now.
Hi, could you talk more about the voice, that push and pull between what a brand or an agency thinks their voice should be as opposed to the people who they're speaking to, how they like to be, the things they like to hear?
Sure. So when I talk about a voice, a lot goes into creating what that voice is. What is that tone? How are you on social media? So to develop that voice, I think one of the things that you need to do is figure out how you are on your own channels, right? And I'm going to assume that most of your own channels are very, very formal. Can you break from that? No, right? Do you or can you break from that on social? Because it is a very different platform, and it's meant to be a conversation. If we go back to the history of social media and why we have it, it was to connect people over the internet. That was it. It was to connect other people in different locations. So developing that voice, who are the people that you're talking to and how are they? Like that is a piece of what has to go into your research to discover what that tone is, what that voice is. We always have to keep our brand in mind, but maybe there are small idiosyncrasies within your organization or brand of military that there are just known, right? If I said hoorah, right? That's something very distinctive. So what is that? What is distinctive in with your target audience? And I would try to pull some of those pieces and develop your brand and your voice through that. Is that helpful? We can talk again after. Do we have it going back up? All right, we're good. Perfect. Okay. So we're going to click through some of these. These were some of my favorite. This is a YouTube channel. This is the Marines. I love the fact that everything is connected here. If I click, I can go to all the social channels. This is really, so for people that aren't in the Marines, competitive analysis, right? So go to these sites and look at who's doing what right. That's something basic. The image here, that you couldn't get a better header, right? You couldn't. I'm not sure what's going on here, but I know I feel compelled and I want to know more. They have a great, this was really good. The Force Design 2030, this was a great video to lead with because it's telling me about the future. If I am somebody in the Marines, I am part of the Marines, I want to join the Marines, this is going to give me a pretty good insight into what's happening. Okay, next slide, please. This is not the Marines, but you know what? Whoever he is, you should know who he is because he's got a lot of followers. Okay, this is just somebody who is probably a Marine and very passionate, really good social, but not an authentic channel. Next slide, please. This is an amalgamation. So that you have the Department of Defense, I pulled in the U.S. Army, I have the Air Force here. These are all really great examples of powerful images and text. What I don't see a lot of are links to other. Where do you want them to go? You've just given them information, but you want them to do something with this, so send them back to your website, right? So in pretty much all of these, maybe with the exception of this one, the World War II ends, I couldn't go anywhere except look at this post. I could comment on it, but remember, we want to send back to owned. Next slide, please. I gave you anatomy of good tweets, so you can scroll through these pretty quickly. This is good information to have. So it's an anatomy of a tweet. There's a Facebook post. There's an Instagram post, and I think LinkedIn. So if you want to create great content, there's some good advice for each of those. So as we close up in our final couple of minutes, any last question that I can answer? Yes?
I got one online.
Okay, perfect.
It says, this is interesting. It says, what happens when you have built a social media platform for your garrison and then the garrison name changes? Is there a strategy for this?
Yeah, that's called a rebranding. So if you know that the name is going to be changing, lead up to it. Don't wait till the last minute and then the name changes and you've lost all of that. So start to create teaser content to say, hey, in 3 months we're going to be X. In 2 months we're going to be X. Right? So that people know these are our new social channels. Make sure that people, right? So because you can, if you give enough lead time, then people are already in the know, right? It's that social currency piece. Other questions? I think we are out of time. I am getting you're off the air. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. All right, guys, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.